Hello everyone, I'm Alicia Malone filling in for Tim Cash. This is the IMDb show and my guest today is Edward Norton.
Thank you.
Much deserved applause because you are the writer, director, producer and star of Motherless Brooklyn. So first off, what are the hours like on set?
I got tired while you were saying it back to me. I was like, why did I do that? The thing is, it sounds like a lot, and in times it is, but it goes in phases, right? So you write alone, and on your own pace. You sort of produce things by, that's its own phase, and then the overlay that's tough is the acting and directing, right?
Yeah.
That's a little tricky, but I really believe, I always believed that as much as I studied like actors and their craft and tried to understand acting itself or filmmaking itself, I always felt it was really important too to study and really understand how did the work that I thought was tremendous get done, and when you actually read about the things that we look back on as the classics, from Citizen Kane to Reds to, and I'm naming films directed and written and acted in by people, Unforgiven, Dances with Wolves, Argo, right?
Yeah.
Examples of times when actors did all the other things too.
In great movies.
In great movies, you realize that like the ways it was hard are very consistent, right? But they're doable, and you can learn from talking. I called Warren Beatty. I was like, you talk about it. You get confidence from people who have done it and inspire you. You know what I mean? And I think that when you have that in your head, you don't feel like you're waiting, like you're walking off the edge of the map and you don't know what's coming. You know what's coming.
Yeah.
And you prepare for it,
But do you talk to your actors any differently when you're talking to them as a co-star versus talking to them as a director?
Well, I think if I said the things as a fellow actor that I would say as a director, I'd be the most hated actor like in the business, which I am not.
Yeah, no, not.
My co-stars love me. I'm friends with all of them.
Well, how about the people you directed?
I'm friends with all of them.
Okay, good.
My co-stars are like ex-girlfriends, but I'm friends with every one of them.
Okay, good.
Some of them very dear friends. But what I think is an actor who directs has a significant advantage, which is that they have a sense of what is actually helpful. Language is a weird thing, and when someone comes in and says too much, for an actor, it can put the head into a spin cycle, right? Wait, what am I supposed to do with that? I had a director once who I really loved working with, but he would essentially talk about how he wanted the scene to work. And I would say, you're giving me a note that's really a note about the scene you're trying to direct. And I lovingly, I eventually said to him, like, you get one verb or one adjective. You can tell me, cajole her, don't criticize her, or seduce her, don't, scare her. That I know what to do with. Like, and so when you're directing actors, I think actors do appreciate that another actor can sometimes say just the right, very small thing, which to me I was inclined toward anyway, because you're already breaking the bubble of concentration that actors create together by stepping out and assessing how it's going or what you want to do different. So to me, just kind of leaning in with something very small is the way to do that.
Yeah.
The other thing that's really important is just to cast actors who show up ready, who are tradecraft professionals.
Is that why you cast a lot of theatre actors?
Yes. This cast, it's you can't get a better cast than I pulled together on this movie. It's some of the finest actors, New York theater actors, movie actors, and I knew that they would show up ready. And in many cases, the film has, I hope, some compelling but very dialogue-heavy scenes, right? And I knew Willem Dafoe and Alec Baldwin and Cherry Jones and people like that know how to come ready to do a play, like ready to give the thing and not sort of rely on cuts or breaks or pauses.
Do a monologue.
Yeah, Alec, that scene in the pool in the end where Alec gives an almost Shakespearean kind of a dark soliloquy. Alec did that in 2 or 3 runs through the whole thing, like driving it like a great Shakespearean actor, and we were done, And that's when you just go, you are like giving me the greatest gift because I'm getting through this, with efficiency, and you're not needing much from me. You're astonishing me. I'm just kind of
just watching,
hoping no one bumped the camera and we're done. I relied on my cast to be able to do those 2 things at the same time. Yeah.
Especially when you're playing a character with Tourette syndrome, so you have a lot of physical manifestations. I imagine you need a cast that can roll with all of that.
Yeah.
Plus, you had to do a lot of research into Tourette syndrome. So what was your most fruitful resource when it came to that research?
Well, it's a very complex and chaotic condition. In some people, it's complex in the sense that it expresses itself in each person very differently. It's not there's no one manifestation of Tourette syndrome. So some people have very subtle physical tics. You might know someone who blinks their eyes hard, very compulsively, and that could be a very mild form of it. I know someone who's a top litigator in New York, and I think a lot of people don't know he has Tourette syndrome, but because they think he's stretching his neck a lot like that. And I worked that in. That was one of the melange of things I pulled into it because it was very visual to me, and it also was one of those things that even if you're sitting in a car above the dashboard, that kind of compulsive sense of that tic. But then some people have the vocal component, which is they have a compulsion to shout things out, or either to repeat certain words, or sometimes say inappropriate things. That's a very extreme form of it that not everybody has. It's and the only thing you can really do is there's some very good films, documentaries about people with Tourette's syndrome. There's one on HBO about children with Tourette's syndrome called I Have Tourette's, Tourette's Doesn't Have Me. It's very funny and poignant. There was a lot in all of those things for me because again, my job was to kind of create my own blend of it in ways that were each credible but unique,
Yeah, fit the character as well. And of course,
and it served the story in some ways. Like, for instance,
from the book too.
I'll give you, there's an NBA player, Chris Jackson, he changed his name and I can't remember. But he had Tourette syndrome, and 2 of the things that he articulates about it I worked into the film. One is that he had an obsession with sounds, and if something didn't sound exactly right, he had to repeat it. So he became a really great free throw shooter because he had a very difficult time stopping the practice of free throws until he hit 10 that swished the net with the right sound.
Yeah, wow.
And that I love that idea, and we worked that into the scene where my character comes into a bar and he gets hit on by a blonde. But unlike most smooth noir detectives, he tries to light her cigarette and can't stop relighting it because he can't get the sound of the match right.
Yeah.
I thought that was neat. And Chris Jackson also talked about his compulsion to touch people on the shoulder, which was something that was not a characteristic of the character in the book, but I thought that was a very visual and kind of heartbreaking because he does it when he's feeling connected to people. And I love that idea that in certain moments, suddenly he's just tapping someone, and it's because he's starting to feel close to them. Those kinds of things, you have to come up with something that is true to the condition, but also is sort of cinematically and emotionally, useful.
Yeah, sort of touching at the wrong moments, but it's a nice way to do it. You mentioned the book Motherless Brooklyn, by Jonathan Lethem, great book. you decided to change the setting to the 1950s. When did you make that decision? Was it pretty quickly?
Pretty early, only because most people who love the book, what they say is what they love about it is the fact that you have this intimacy with the character inside his head, hearing his clear voice, and then you watch the manifestations of his condition trip him up in funny and sometimes very painful ways, right? And that was the core of what I loved about the book, and I wanted to replicate in the film, that you hear his inner voice even while you watch him go through his struggles, and that's part of why you feel empathy for him, right? But the book has a slightly surreal device, which is just that the characters feel like detectives from a 50s noir, but they're in modern Brooklyn. And it kind of works in a book, but I was worried on film it might seem like you were being tongue-in-cheek, like it was like Reservoir Dogs or the Blues Brothers or something that's kind of nudge, nudge, wink, wink. And Jonathan Lethem also liked the idea of putting it in a time where people were not so PC, and maybe a little harsher on him,
Yeah.
and where we could just lean into the spirit of the book, which is a detective noir kind of a spirit. He was fortunately supportive of that idea.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
And, you've worked with so many great directors. When you're directing yourself, were there things that you took from some directors you've worked with?
Stole, borrowed, carbon copied.
Made your own, yeah.
Made my own. Let other people think I came up with every version. I think but what's funny is, yes, I happen to have worked with not only some really great directors, but some directors who have made really great films on short schedules. You know what I mean? And I hope one day I'm a director respected enough to get $200 million from Netflix to make my period film. Right now, I am not, and so we made this film. We made this film independently. Warner came in and supported us and is putting it out, but we made the film independently. We made it for only $26 million, and I think
not long. Your schedule.
No, and we had to do it in 46 days,
God.
which is shorter than
Yeah.
many films I've made that had much more schedule. When I showed the movie to Warren Beatty, who
He's got great stories.
yeah, is pretty. He was really complimentary, but then he was like, "Wow, what did you do? Like 80 days on that?" And I was like, "No, I said we got I said 47," and he goes, "You're a lion, son of a bitch." And I said, "No, we really did." He goes, I think it shocked him, and that made me happy because I think we did have an incredible crew. We had a crew that prepared rigorously and came up with brilliant hacks around how to do a big scale movie in that kind of time. But I made the 25th Hour with Spike Lee, and he did that in 27 days.
Wow.
I made, Wes Anderson has made many films in some of the most efficient productions I've ever worked on, and you learn a lot working with people like that. Working with Spike had an enormous impact on me because Spike, of course, has this personality. He's this combative and iconoclastic and kind of energetic personality, and you wouldn't necessarily think that underneath that is he's like a drill sergeant. He rehearsal every day for weeks and weeks and weeks, levels of preparation like you've never seen, and he just blazes through
Wow.
his work, and it's very inspiring. It's inspiring to find out that work that you loved was done in that way, because it, honestly, these days especially, I think, you have to be willing to work that way sometimes to get these kinds of movies made. It's hard to make these almost like old-fashioned LA
Original
Confidential
films, yeah.
kind of films that we all love, but if you blow up the economics on them, they become legitimately risky, really risky, like too risky in some ways. And I think you have to figure out ways. And for me, this incredible cast of people being willing to work within that construct and literally not take their their normal fees, and everything was such a gift.
Yeah.
We couldn't have done it otherwise. If Bruce Willis and he was the first one. If he hadn't stepped in and said, "I'm in," I get it. We're doing this way, and I could have never done this.
Everyone's like, if Bruce is doing it,
yeah,
then I'm in too.
Well, it doesn't. I think people do. I mean, hopefully it was partly they responded to the material, and I know Willem. Willem has lived in New York for 40 or 50 years, and he has a real sense of social justice and some of the dark things in the social history of New York, and he cared about it. He actually he was drawn to the ethos of his character, like the idea of a person who seems sort of unhinged in a way, but turns out to be a morally heroic person who has prioritized caring about other people over amassing power and wealth. And I think he actually cared about that message. I think he cared and wanted to be part of expressing it,
Yeah. I know you're a fan of TV and film, so can you give us some things that you are watching or things that you are looking forward to seeing?
I really enjoyed this documentary on Netflix recently about Clarence Avant called The Black Godfather.
Yeah.
It's really, really worth checking out. I think it actually dovetails with the themes in my film, in Motherless Brooklyn, in a strong degree, because it's really about a person you realize was incredibly influential and in the center of so many people's careers that you revere in a way you can't even really believe it. And slowly you realize he didn't do it for his own enrichment. He did it to help other people rise, and he created this web of good karma. Like, everybody who was affected by him said they feel a responsibility to do right by other people because of how he treated them, and it's very affecting. It's a kind of a rare story in Hollywood. You know what I mean?
Yeah, paying it forward, helping others.
I really liked that one.
Yeah, after you told me about that, I watched the trailer, and I was
you
like,
did?
Now I have to watch it.
It's really terrific. On the flip, I caught this series that I had never seen called Altered Carbon.
What's that
about?
That
kind of came and went, and I'm knocked out by it. It's really good science fiction and really fantastic production values and everything. And this guy, Joel Kinnaman, who I've met here and there and surfed with, is really good in it. And it's kind of one of those things that it's sort of it's almost like Blade Runner. But I've been really struck by the production values of it and the quality of it. It's a lot of fun.
Okay, I've got to put that on my list.
It's like an extended Black Mirror
love Black Mirror
episode, which I love.
Yeah, I'm obsessed with Black Mirror. Anything else?
I'm really behind on films this year because I was so deep in making my own film, and now I'm putting it out. So there's a lot I want to catch up with. But so I'm a little behind. I've been down in kind of Netflix land. I'm catching up on Fleabag, which is really, really great.
Yeah, what do you like about that show?
It's just it's some of the things I loved about The Office, the breaking the fourth wall sort of sardonic thing. She's just brilliantly funny. But I'm not far along enough to tell, but you have this sense that there's this emotional depth lurking under it that now I'm kind of waiting for it to kind of uncork in a way. There's some there's some pain under the armor of it in a way, and I'm enjoying that.
Yeah, she's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure, total pleasure.